People who have got it on with someone with a disability of some sorts. What was different about that experience? I'm a congenital amputee. I basically have one arm that's a much smaller nub with a small finger. Multiple girls have wanted the nub. Once they get it, they realize they don't want the nub at all. It's hilarious.
We now have a Discord. Check out the server in the link in the description.
Story 2. I have a friend with benefits. She was born with some issues, which resulted in both of her legs being amputated at the thigh, as well as her left arm amputated at the elbow. She scoots around her apartment on a skateboard. It's awesome. Anyway, imagine a 90-pound skinny girl with no legs and half an arm. Basically, she liked to be manhandled and used. Also, the term sit and spin was very true with her. There are a myriad of positions you can now do when the other person is only half of a person. Out of context, that last line could be super weird. Story 3. I had a brief relationship with a dwarf. I expected the banging to be awkward because I'm 6'2", but it was actually very natural, because her torso was typically sized and everything lined up like it should. Something that was different was that I could easily lift her for an extended period of time, so we could do some stuff I can't really pull off with full-sized girls. It was a lot of fun. Story 4. Not me, but my friend is dating a girl, and thought the first time they banged, he was rocking her world, heavy breathing and gasping, until she shoves him off of her and scrambles for her inhaler. Apparently, she's heavily asthmatic. The next date, she abruptly goes motionless, her head lolls back, and her eyes close. He thought she was dying of some sort of asthma complication. Turns out she's also narcoleptic. She since got better meds for both issues, although I heard she's dyslexic too. Her genes must be interesting. You would think something like asthma would come up before you do the deed, right? Like, that seems like a situation where it could very easily become an issue. Story 5. Guy across the hall from me in college had no reservation with regards to partners. Brought back a deaf girl with 0 volume control, 0 self-editing of the blow-by-blow, that muffled things, and poor articulation. Half the floor broke into applause and she had no idea. Story 6. I'm a quadriplegic and I just happen to pleasure myself often, so I like to think that gives me both perspectives. Due to limited feelings in my lower 2/3, it's almost like I'm giving another dude a handy when I jerk it. But then again, my hands also have limited feelings, so it feels like someone else is doing it. Weird way to describe it, but there you go. Try wrapping your mind around that. OP wrapped more than his mind around it, ayo! Story 7. I dated someone with an inoperable brain tumor once. We hooked up for the first time drunk after a Halloween party, and we were full on going at it, until she had a major tonic seizure. Unfortunately, she had failed to mention to me that she had epilepsy, and I freaked out thinking that something was horribly wrong. When she finally came to, she explained that it rarely happened during the act, and was actually a very, very good thing. So I got to check off climax-induced seizure from my bucket list. So my first thought was, drinking with an inoperable brain tumor, that seems like a bad idea. But then I'm like, if it's really not good, then what do you have to lose? Story 8. I'm in a long-term relationship with a fabulous woman who is paralyzed from the neck down. I did perceive her disability to be a bit of a disqualifier before our relationship. I was a powerlifting gym bro, and pictured being with a similarly ripped gym girl who could keep up with me and challenge me. Like we could build our relationship around the fitness commitments or some BS. But my girl won me over almost effortlessly with her intelligence, wit, and personality. Nobody can make me laugh like she can, and certainly no one can challenge me to be a better person like she can. As for the gym stuff, my physical strength ended up being pretty useful in helping her move around and keep her comfortable. And she thinks I'm attractive. In a way, it seems like I was training for something I could have never anticipated. The banging is fun. She's kinky and very visually oriented, but aside from the obvious above the neck stuff, there isn't a lot of physical feedback she can give. That can make it difficult at times, and there's always the risk of hurting her by getting too creative with positions. We were a lot more adventurous at the start of things, but through a few painful learning experiences we found out what works and what doesn't. She's in pain a lot of the time, which somewhat limits how much we can do. It's unfortunate, but we have developed some pretty good communication skills. When it's good though, it's unbelievable. She's my best friend and I wouldn't exchange her for anyone. Edit, she's also incredibly hot. Story 9. Wife had a stroke a couple years ago. She has a good bit of lingering disability from it. I'll not go into detail of what all there is. She decided about a year or so after the event that she wanted to try banging. I think more for me than for her though. I argued with her about it and wasn't really into it to begin with, but I did eventually make the attempt and I fully wish I hadn't. It just felt wrong. She felt wrong. I didn't finish and she never even started. We've not discussed banging since then. We both just know it's not in the cards for us anymore. And for context, I'm 41 and she's 44. Story 10. I dated a girl back in the early 2000s who lost a leg in a car accident. She was aggressively frisky to a fault. I'm not sure nympho is the right term for her. I think it was more that she used banging as a way to cope with her anger about the situation. Because her leg was removed near her hip, it was easier to perform missionary than other positions. So that was typically how we did it. It was easier for me because I could maneuver more without her leg getting in the way. Some people might say that's a crappy thing to say, but I think she would tell you that it made it better, which it definitely did. She was a cool girl and I really liked her, but she had a lot of emotional issues and pent-up anger. I was never really able to come to terms with that, and after a while I got tired of being the punching bag. I never blamed her though. She was a professional dancer before losing her leg, and it destroyed her career. She never recovered that part of herself, and I could tell it destroyed her. I wanted to be that person for her, support her, but her anger just pushed me away. The banging was crazy good though, some of the best I've ever had. But that isn't enough to sustain a relationship. People ask me if I was ever weirded out by it or had issues with her missing leg, and honestly, no. After a while, it was just a normal, everyday thing. I cared about her, and I still think about her sometimes. I mean, hey, it's true what they say. To be in a relationship with someone, you have to love yourself first, or it's just gonna be bad. It sounds like after that accident, the girl was not at peace with herself, and that's expected, to be honest. It just means that being in a relationship right after is not the right time. Story 11. I myself was born with a heart defect that causes me to get tired really fast. Intimate activity can be a hit or miss because of this. Most positions I'm okay with. The problem is if my wife and I are banging someplace other than a bed. For example, in front of the fireplace is a no-go because I have to support myself for an extended period of time. And then I turn blue from the lack of oxygen and then, well, no more frisky time. My blood pressure being what it is can also cause issues with performance. But luckily my wife and I know what each other likes, so it doesn't take long. Ain't no marathon sessions going on in the bedroom though. Edit. I'll try to answer a lot of the questions I've read here. First, my condition is called tricuspid atresia. It's a birth defect of the heart that causes the tricuspid valve in the heart to not form properly. So basically what that means is that the part of your heart that normally sends your blood to your lungs to get oxygenated isn't there. So you get no oxygen in your blood, which causes me to get tired. I've had multiple open heart surgeries to correct this. First one at 3 days old. So for me, it's pretty hard to do even the simplest of tasks sometimes because of this. It's gotten easier as I've gotten older. My cardiologist has mentioned that I'm very high functioning for someone with this condition. Even still, chasing a 3-year-old while having this condition is rough. Second, yes, my wife is very understanding, and there are times where we are unable to finish. Now, most times when this happens, I've usually done enough to get her there, but for me, it's not happening. She feels bad for me when this happens, but she has stated that usually whenever we bang a few days later after a failed attempt on my part, I try to go longer than usual. And she has told me that I don't need to feel like I need to make up for anything. We've even had times where she just wants me to finish and not worry about her, but me being me, I can't do that, so I've always helped her. Also, yes, we have used toys in the bedroom. We have tried other positions that are easier for me. Missionary is best because it doesn't put a lot of strain on me to try and support either myself or her. Plus, the wife likes that one best anyway. For those who have mentioned that they get tired fast as well, if you think something is going on with your heart, don't wait around. Get that looked into ASAP. Heart issues aren't something to ignore, so please get it looked at if you feel like it might be. It might not be anything to do with your heart, but do not take that chance. Story 12. Oh man, I'm late to the party, but this is one of my favorite NSFW stories about my own life, so I have to share. While I was at university, for a few months I dated a girl with a number of health issues. She'd been born really underweight, suffered from bad joints, fibromyalgia, an inverted uterus, and a host of other issues. Banging was kinda complicated, but she was fun and attractive, and we made it work. She also lost her right eye due to an infection when she was a child, leaving her partially sighted with one glass eye. Once, while we were getting into it doggy style on one particularly vigorous thrust from me, said glass eye flew out. It hit the headboard with an audible ting. I stopped, uncertain of what just happened, only for her to turn around with one eye missing and burst out laughing when I fell back in surprise. She was pretty cool and we're still friends. To this date, she says that's never happened with anyone else. You've heard of eyes rolling back in heads, but have you heard of eyes flying out? Sounds like OP knows how to have a good time. Story 13. Dated a girl who was extremely hard of hearing. Something like 10% hearing in one ear and 30% in the other. The tiny bones in her ears were damaged during her birth by an overzealous doctor with forceps. Banging was mostly normal except her bad ear was like a free nut button. all it took was kissing her on her bad ear, a part of her body she was probably extremely self-conscious about. Other than that, if her hearing aids were out, say in the shower, she would be twice as loud as a full-hearing girl without realizing it. It's had its benefits and its drawbacks. Story 14. I'm deaf with a cochlear implant. It used to be an implant that was behind the ear, but my current processor isn't. I usually clip it to my shirt on a day-to-day basis. But if I want to hear my wife while we're doing the deed, I gotta keep my shirt on. It wasn't really a big deal for a while, but after a few years of always banging with a shirt on, it gets old. I'm upgrading my processor in 2019, and I'm switching back to a behind-the-ear processor strictly so I can hear my wife. While completely naked, that is. Okay, wait, this is so funny though, because if you're like having an argument with someone and you're like, I'm so done with you, I don't want to hear anything else, you take off your shirt. It's a display of dominance and you just immediately end an argument. Well, like, you don't really end it because they're probably pissed, but still. Story 15. Dated a girl that used a wheelchair to get around. She could hobble short distances if she had something to hold on to, but that was fairly significantly impaired. Anyway, we were doing it in the guest bedroom at my mom's house. I was pretty drunk, as was the norm at the time, and I went from V to A with her permission. Things got messy very quickly. Excrement was on me and her. I panicked, threw some boxers on, maybe some pants, and started the shower. Now, the bathroom is directly across the hall from the office at my mom's house, and my mom happened to be in it on the computer at the time. I made awkward eye contact with my mom and closed the office door, something I had never done before. Then helped my special lady friend into her chair, covered her in a towel, maybe a blanket, and pushed her down the hall into the bathroom where we showered together. Other than that one incident, every other time was great. She was a good Christian girl and a real firecracker when the clothes came off. I was just a drunk that marketed myself well on Tinder and followed rule 1 and 2 of dating. Okay, how would OP's mom not hear anything though? OP has a lot of faith in the soundproofing of that house. Story 16. Met a dude who'd had a really bad motorcycle accident about a year and a half prior. He basically shattered his pelvis and legs and was lucky to be alive. A lot of surgeries and a colostomy bag later, he was able to get around alright, but definitely not for an extended amount of time. His legs were pretty atrophied and he wore braces on both of his ankles. But just in the little time I knew him, his strength was getting better every day. So anyway, the time comes to do the do, and I was concerned because I didn't want us to do something and have his bag detach, and then there'd just be a mess. Turns out he had a solution for this very situation. Basically, he wore a belt around his torso with a bag cover that was non-slip. So no matter how freaky we got, it wasn't moving. There were some positions that were better for him than others, but other than that, it was pretty on par with other hookups I've had. That dude was screwed up mentally though. He basically confided in me that the accident was an unalive attempt, that he now regrets. It got extremely deep and then extremely weird very quickly, and for various reasons I decided to stop having any kind of contact with him a couple weeks later. I still felt bad about it for a while though, because he obviously needed the help, because no one else in his life was able to or willing to give it to him, and he was spiraling. All sympathy for him basically went out of the window though, when 3 months of no contact later the guy hits me up and tells me he has an STD. And he knew when we hooked up, but didn't say anything at the time, and I need to get tested. We had used protection, but he sent me this message while I was at work, and I freaked out. It was traumatic. That was over 2 years ago now, and all of my tests have been clean, so thank goodness. But still, screw that dude. I hope his life got better, though. Not telling someone you have an infectious disease in any context, really, but especially an intimate one? Come on. That is loser behavior. Story 17. My husband is an amputee. 10 years ago, lost a leg along with some nerve damage. The nerve damage causes some impotence. Nothing serious, just sometimes where we have to call it early or not at all. Once he realized that I wasn't judging him for it back when we were dating, it got better. He had a lot of nervousness about it, which makes it worse. But it usually just takes a little extra effort on my part to get him ready. Part of that is also he is very giving. If he feels like I'm not into it, it happens. It's just who he is. And he's a wonderful person. I couldn't ask for a better significant other. As far as the missing leg, he's a below-the-knee amputee and wears a prosthetic. But they've been trying to fix the nerve damage for years, and he has good and bad days. He can't stand during banging for long. The rest is about the same physically. The worst part is when he really wants to, but can't. Personally, yeah, it can get frustrating, but more the situation and how he's feeling. For the most part, we have a wonderful intimate life. Story 18. My ex-wife had a form of muscular dystrophy, and she was so very weak physically. I had to do most of the work, and some positions just weren't possible. On the other hand, she was light enough that I could pick her up really easily, and when we were feeling adventurous, I could stand and completely hold her up with her wrapped around the front of me. which is something that hardly anyone else I've been with was small enough for me to do. I guess the other thing is that she needed physical help with stuff like cleanup and undressing. Overall, there were fun times, but it was about as different as you'd think. Later, I hooked up with a chick with one leg. She was pretty strong and had a nice, big, round butt, and I think she was probably the one who gave me the notion that this is a pretty great thing. Anyway, what was different about banging with her was that when we did it doggy, it was super easy and comfortable to figure out where to put my knees. You know how you're sort of fighting for bed space to either widen your stance, or maybe have to have her legs outside of yours if the levels don't quite line up? Totally not a problem here. Her leg went between my legs, and could totally go to town with complete abandon at the perfect leg spacing. Story 19. I dated a girl that had a compulsion to cut her wrists with a box cutter after she climaxed. She always wore sweaters as she was tiny, and I knew about the numerous scars, but none seemed recent, so I wasn't concerned. I didn't know the trigger at the time. I thought it was something in her past, and we left it alone. We had talked about it lightly, and I asked her to promise me to never hurt herself again. Naivete on my part. Well, turns out she hadn't gotten off in quite a while before we got together, and thereafter hid the fact from me for a while very well with bracelets when naked and long sleeves otherwise. I caught her in the act one day when she thought I was asleep, and she turned rabid. Never experienced anything like that. She was vicious and entirely different. Demonic. I, not knowing what to do, used the box cutter to cut my shirt and bandage her arm with it. This was no small slice. Blood everywhere at this point. I sat on the floor of her bathroom and just looked at her stunned, bloody hands in front of me. Her sitting there looking sheepish like she had spilled milk or something. After a pause, I said, "There's no way I could do this, as I can't handle someone hurting themselves like that due to anything I did." She tried to unalive herself that night after I left, while leaving me a voicemail screaming and crying, saying that she couldn't believe I left her. She then ended up in a hospital for a while after I called her mom, who found her nearly unconscious. She still tries to mess with my life from time to time, dropping in through social media or mutual acquaintances. She was utterly perfect to me in regards to intelligence, interests, beauty, and outlook on life, yet deeply broken in a way I am not equipped to deal with. That messes with me a lot even still. I had known her for a long time and we'd spent a lot of time as friends together before it ever became more. I loved her in a way I had never felt before or since. So as it is now, I'm afraid of stepping on a landmine again and it screws things up.